Welcome everyone to Sasha's Archipelago. I, on behalf of Develop, Philippine Internet Archive, 𝓢𝓪𝓼𝓪, and all the projects we have as Fleet, are so excited to be hosting Sasha Magallona. I first discovered Sasha's work when I saw um, the Boiler Room campaigns for Manila Community Radio. I saw them, I was so obsessed, and I had to figure out who was behind it. And I saw Sasha and Nash's work, I think, who were the people behind the project, and just fell kind of like in love with her visual style. I think my description of the event was like, no graphic practice reflects the nuances, extremes of tropical ecologies, fiction, heat, and eccentricities of the extremely online contemporary Filipino like Sasha's, which sounds like
That's so sweet.
intense, but to me it rings very true. It just felt so incredibly resonant, especially in an age where kind of like the aesthetics of past and future are so blurred to me in both like process and the visual artifacts that I see in design. Um, so yeah, I'm so excited to be hosting Sasha, who I think is calling in from Spain, and who has done so much fantastic work with the Boiler Room, as I mentioned, with Denim Tears, Universal Records, the NBA, so many other like local Manila orgs and international like Filipino groups. But yeah, feel free to take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the intro. Like, I never know how to react just because it's so damn. I could never describe myself as that. Okay. I think I can take it away with the archipelago. Like, Chia did a great job of introducing me. Okay, so I can share my screen. 1 second. All right. Okay. How do I do this? Hold up. Hmm.
So
Share
it might
screen.
be
There.
easier to see.
Hmm. Okay. Can everybody see it? Is it working for you guys?
Looks great.
Okay, okay, cool. So welcome to my archipelago. So this was actually a design task that I did for an interview. They told me introduce your design journey. What are your influences as a creative? No formats you have to follow, just do your thing. And whenever there's full creativity in a project, I always have fun with it. So essentially, first I reflected, wrote down everything, and then in the end, I came up with the idea that I wanted to immerse the viewer to my world, how I see it, and of course, like this whole presentation, like it won't be understandable without me explaining it. I was actually inspired by Chia, the lovely queen who has invited me here today, because I watched one of her poetry performances at 5 a.m. actually, because of the difficult time zones, where she was navigating a website while performing and merging the art of presentation and her craft was so groundbreaking to me because I've never seen anything like it. So this is a very bootleg version of that, where I talk about my journey as a designer. So yeah, I'll take you guys to my island. So yeah, it's very interactive. So when we hover, we can sail to my first island. So welcome to Connectopia. So this slide is basically an introduction to the world of pop culture. So ever since I was a kid, my brain was fried by television and the internet, but fried in like the best way possible. So I've always loved the concept of the celebrity. So here I put the discovery being the golden ages of Hannah Montana, Justin Bieber, One Direction, and Drake, just because these are the biggest ones. But there was also a bunch in between. Like my first phase was probably Barney, the dinosaur. And it's crazy because like when I was a kid, I was immersing myself in these worlds and the ideas of these people. And I say idea because I feel like these celebrities are brands. Like for example, they were selling Hannah Montana to me by how they were framing her as somebody relatable. Like she sassed her parents, she went to school, but there was that aspirational aspect of her where she was a pop star, and I wanted to be a pop star. And all these traits, these values, these stories are what personifies them. And how they frame these celebrities, these brands, is how we connect with them. And this is very significant because I work a lot with brands. So that's making brands, working for brands, and selling to brands. Like I've done it all. And this connection that you build with these audiences, even if the brand isn't a person, it's a product, like it's so powerful. Like I've seen brands that have very weak values and it just does not work. So the language here would be storytelling and personification. And it's a huge foundation um, in design, especially if you're working in brand. So next we sail to the Isle of Pop. So now that we understand how these images in pop culture connect with people, we understand the power of its ubiquity. So I put here the discovery being the first time I visited an Andy Warhol exhibit when I was around 13 or 14. So around this time, I ran a One Direction Tumblr blog. Like I worked way too hard. I was making like edits of Harry Styles. I made Zayn a vampire and I made GIFs out of their music videos. Um, and there I got to experiment a lot. I also learned how to adapt to different design trends. And I was like, what, 14, 15, 13. And within Tumblr, like, oh my God, I could make a separate talk just for Tumblr and how it shaped the designers of today. But it's basically how I became very fluent in Adobe Photoshop. And at the time, I was in high school and I didn't know what to do in my life, but I just knew that I love design and I loved celebrities. And then my dad brings me to this exhibit, and this mysterious man in a white wig, Andy Warhol, like he was just like me. I was like, oh my God, he's my twin. So that's why I put his iconic Marilyn paintings here. Because the reason why his works were so powerful was because he understood the power of things that were familiar to us, things that we saw in the everyday. And a lot of the people at the time, actually even now, like I have some people being like, oh, Andy Warhol's overrated. They find it ridiculous. Like, why would you paint a soup can or something like that? But it's funny to me because for years, like all the fine art that we visit Europe for, religion was basically pop, and all the artworks were of scenes in the Bible, or all the songs were about that. So Jesus Christ was basically like the original Marilyn Monroe. That's why I put him here. And we see this effect until today, and it's basically just a thing that's always been happening throughout different times. Like pop is so powerful. And then next we go to the next island. We go to Forward Forest. So after that exhibit, I ended up pursuing design in my bachelor's degree back in Manila. And while I was reflecting about the skills I had and what was being asked for in the industry and so on, I realized that my career is very dependent on tech. Like tech isn't going to stop developing, it's going to become more complex, and also it's becoming more accessible, which is why I feel like there are so many conversations now about AI because everyone has the power to create something. And the discovery, well, I've always known it, but like I feel like the Balenciaga summer campaign video back in 2020 was just so impactful to me. Um, because like I wasn't very immersed in the world of fashion, but I saw that video and they were presenting their new collection, and it was like this fictional dark dystopian news channel, and it looked like it was in the year 2090 and everyone was in full Balenciaga and the score was so freaky, and then there were little like subtitles about what the world was like in this crazy dystopian future. And it was just one of those videos that I watched over and over again because it made me think a lot. Like I think a similar feeling is how like when some people watch a Black Mirror episode and they feel like they're like, damn, like imagine if the world was like that, something like that. And when I graduated uni, I didn't know a lot about tech, but I was very motivated to learn more about it and immerse myself in the world here and there. So I studied a master's in design, innovation, and technology. That's actually why I'm in Barcelona. I graduated last year. And it wasn't a very hardcore master's course, but it was a good entry point for me to sort of adjust the way I would ideate. So the way I would ideate now, it incorporates like evolving technology and innovations to my ideas. So maybe, for example, like I have this idea and I think that, yeah, this is possible because you can incorporate this kind of technology and it can happen. Like it's just very inspiring that like the possibilities are endless. And nowadays I find that there's actually a lot of fear around tech and the future, especially with creatives, especially with illustrators. And of course, it makes a lot of sense. Like anything in the world, I think, though, has a good and a bad side. Um, and I feel like with the emerging technologies now, it's best to embrace it for its best. And because it's never gonna like hinder. Like people are like, oh my God, stop AI. Like it's no one's gonna stop AI. Let's be real. But I feel like it's still very important to speak out about the negative side to it. Like for example, my thesis was actually about how the algorithms right now are affecting how we see beauty because they always push for a certain standard. Like, of course, it's always been a thing, but these algorithms are making it much worse. So I wanted to, so while making my app, I was looking up photos. I was generating photos actually on Stable Diffusion. And whenever I would sort of like generate, let's say, a woman from the Philippines, it will either be very traditional Filipiniana wear or they would be sexualized. And that's terrible because like this is what this AI knows about Filipino women is this. And yeah, I hate it. So yeah, those are my thoughts about like tech and design. And I want to end the trip to this island by giving a shout out to Chris Fussner. So he's the king who runs Tropical Futures, which I will get more into when we go to the next island. But he's very heavy in the tech scene as well. And even if he was my boss for around 2 years, I really see him more as a mentor and an inspiration to who I am as a designer in a lot of ways. So yeah, now let's go to Eclecticana. So I was very lucky to have come across Tropical Futures when I was 22 and to become a part of it. So Tropical Futures is a multidisciplinary studio. We've done stuff for music, art, fashion, tech, events, and it's rooted in exploring the tropics. So what I mean by that, it's like exploring, observing, and taking deep dives into aesthetics that have evolved around tropical cultures, subcultures, and seeing the common points between these tropical practices, people, and aesthetics. So I guess an example that I have is that I had a conversation with a Brazilian designer who I met on Arena and Instagram. And we talked about how Latin American aesthetics are somewhat similar to Filipino aesthetics because we were both taken over by colonizers who wanted to push the Catholic agenda, followed by a very heavy influence of American pop culture. But then we also try to localize it and make it our own thing. And like I just find it so fascinating because we're on opposite sides of the world, but yet we make something similar. And like I feel like these narratives are so important because I came from design school in the Philippines where I read a book about world design history, and it was 90% Western design, maybe even 95. And they had one chapter where they lumped in Latin American design and Japanese design. And I'm like, really? So like I think that's why I put these dragons and all these like fantasy creatures in this island for the visuals because it's sort of like an ironic play on the exotic outsider view of the world outside of the mainstream West. And as a Filipino designer, I would like to represent the aesthetics that come from our modern vernacular visual language because there's so much more to Philippine design than just slapping a Philippine flag onto something and putting something traditional that's more found in a history book than the everyday. Um, so yeah, I feel like there really is more to the tropics and like anything that's outside of the West. You just have to like deep dive and see the beauty for yourself. So yeah, that's it for my archipelago. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank
Thank you so much for that amazing walkthrough of your work
you.
and
Mhm.
your influences, Sasha. It's so cool to see. Um, I think we're gonna dive into a little Q&A now. I'm gonna lead the conversation, but as I mentioned, anyone feel free to drop comments in the chat. We can talk over some of Sasha's like mentioned projects in a bit more detail, or in general more on her influences and her practice and process, like any direction towards the conversation goes. And I see Bianca has already left a question, so thank you. Feel free to leave them. But yeah, I wanted to maybe go ahead and start with this idea that you were alluding to at the end about what is like Filipino design and what does it mean to like make use of the Filipino vernacular? Like how do we as designers kind of like step back when we've received a prompt and kind of like determine that like there are influences and the practice and then the artifacts that we're using in assembling a design feel like distinctly Filipino, especially when so much of Filipino identity has been an assemblage of like influences and a question of like reclamation and a question of like constant decolonization also, which also feels like especially pertinent in your practice. Like I immediately see the usage of like a lot of found assets. They feel very nostalgic, but also you've assembled them in a way that feels like very reminiscent of the kind of like maximalist kind of like design you see all around the Philippines. And obviously like our nation's history in terms of like marketing and consumption and religion, etc., are all about kind of adapting Western influences and evolving like our own traditional practices and rituals and trying to make things as our own, as you mentioned. So maybe I'll begin with that very broad question of what makes Filipino design in practice and process or an outcome to you.
That's such a difficult question. But no, yeah. So I think how I would say it, I think I had this question too back when I figure out um all these things, like what makes something Filipino. And I feel like what makes it Filipino is if the person making it is Filipino. I think it's just ingrained in them, ingrained in the things that influence them. I feel like initially when I was making my works, um, the first thought wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna make this and this is Filipino design. It it just comes out. It's not like that. It's more like it just comes out. And then afterwards, when you see like what you formed, that's when you see the influences. It kind of just comes with it. Like for example, how my works are very maximalist, very messy. You know, the boiler room graphics, it was inspired by jeepneys and like other posters and everything that we see in the Filipino everyday. Um, I realized that like it was actually so easy for me because it was already part of my personal aesthetic whenever I would make designs. And I didn't realize that only until after the process when I made Boiler Room. I was like, oh my God, that was actually so it was already like it was already my style. It was already part of me. Like we had these we had the prompt like, you know, inspired by jeepneys and things like that, but it was already something that like came very naturally because like it's something that I consumed a lot growing up, something that I saw everywhere. I think also just like being able to consume media and remembering the media that you have consumed when you were growing up or like all these things about Filipino culture, um, I feel like it's very important to hold on to that rather than just like um, putting all your efforts into like learning all these like mainstream Western trends, because it really shows in somebody's works. That's what I would say. I'm not sure if I actually like answered the question correct, but yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Do you mind if I share my screen and kind of scroll through your Boiler Room Arena channel?
Sure, yeah, go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Go ahead.
I think that answered the question. And
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know how ancient this is, but I think this is
I
a
made this
good
with
like
Nash. Yeah.
segue. Yeah. You collaborate with Nash Cruz on the boiler room designs, and something I have appreciated about learning about your design practice is that you're like a very prolific collector of references, and you have like the most amazing like collections of like graphic inspiration
Oh
and
my
design
God.
inspiration in general. Um, which maybe brings me to like Bianca's question that she posed in the Q&A. I'll read it out while slowly scrolling through this. Bianca Aguilar says, I'd love to know about your research process. How do you find inspiration to inform your work? For context, one of my favorite profs, Carl Castro for Philippine design, did you take that subject in Ateneo? Said he doesn't use sites like Pinterest at all. He prefers to find inspiration in everyday surroundings and local works. That really stuck with me until now. Wonder if you think along similar lines.
Oh my God. I was under Carl Castro actually. So Carl Castro is just for context for everybody in the call, he's an amazing Filipino designer and artist and author. And he was actually one of the first ones who introduced it to our classes. He was the only one different who actually like talked about all these things, like getting inspiration from everyday Filipino um vernacular and not just reading that design book I told you guys about that only had one chapter for anything else that wasn't Western. So I am actually very different in terms of his practice, where he doesn't like going on Pinterest or whatever. I am like the hyper opposite because Chia, if you can go to my arena. So arena, for everyone who doesn't know, it's like Pinterest, but um it's made for creatives, like your creative industry, and it doesn't rely on algorithms where you're just fed different things that you already consume. It doesn't rely on the cookies and whatever. It's kind of like traditional website surfing, where you really go through everybody's collections of the things that inspire them, and then you can collect it, and then you can also connect things if you put them all together. It's not just photos, it's also you can do PDFs, you can do text, videos. This is sounding sponsored right now, but it's not. It's just I just love it this much. So here, like I really like to collect everything that inspires me because I never know what's going to click later on. And that ranges from, oh, if you could go to the boards, please. Thank you. Oh, sorry, they're called channels. Yeah. Here I have so many. Like for example, sometimes there are things from the everyday, like the Barcelona book market. Like during markets, I like to take photos of the covers because they're so pretty. Finds Catholic bracelets or things related to merchandise, different music videos that I love, record label logos. Like oh my God, I'm a hoarder. Obviously, I'm a hoarder. Um, and for me, it's just so much fun. And I think you never know. Like sometimes I don't want to forget anything. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, I personally love it. So yeah, I'm the opposite. I try to find inspiration from everything. Like as you can see here, it's not just like design stuff, it's also like objects. Um, I have a lot of playlists also because I like those design books, um, ideas, yeah, research. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit like a really strong point as to why Arena feels quite different from Pinterest.
Mhm.
And it's related to what you mentioned about your thesis, where Pinterest is like super easy to use and consume and easy to just get lost in because they have a
Mhm.
very good algorithm that favors like what looks visually similar to this style. What else is like tagged similarly? What else does the creator consume? Whereas if I would click on like an object um or a block in Arena, every single connection is weaved like very intentionally by other people. There's no like algorithmic kind of sorting. It's just like what have other people sorted this into. So it feels a lot more human.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And the thing about like all these algo based platforms and websites is that eventually you just see the same thing over and over again. And it just doesn't feel inspiring anymore. So I like how these are very human in a way too.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to point also is like the influences that you gather here are I think not always traditionally seen as like graphic design inspiration. Like these are not what like
Yeah.
mood board like type accounts or like what Pinterest users would normally upload because like Pinterest users like 17-year-old girls like running aesthetic accounts and I'm not sure if they always like
Mhm.
would well, one, like the users there are not always Filipino,
Nash
and
put that one. Nash is a king.
yeah, like who finds inspiration from like sacks of rice?
Right? But they're pretty cool. I think there's probably a board somewhere. No, it's not. I think it's in the tropical features though. But like I was just like I would dump different rice sacks because I think we wanted to do a rice sack bag. Um,
There's another question in the Q&A. Is any other favorite non-algo social media sites like Arena from
hmm,
Zubin Mulji?
that's a good question. Actually, I don't think I can think of one at the moment. For me, Arena is like one of the best. So yeah, I wish I knew. And I don't know, I don't actually know if I would count it as a social media. Because I feel like it lacks actually no, it is a little social if you think about it, but you can't really message anybody. Um, sadly, you can collaborate on making boards and like collecting inspiration, but the traditional things that we would associate with social media where you can send photos, comment, or message is very far from Arena. Um, I don't think I've ever found something else that isn't too like algorithmic. So yeah. I mean there's Discord, but I don't know. I don't know if that counts.
I think another point also that might also still be challenging in Arena is I think still the question of like is like local graphic design represented? Like is the Filipino vernacular like accurately represented in that like do we have artifacts like this rice sack as frequently uploaded as like say whatever like Western design studio or agency is putting out?
No,
Um,
that's so real.
which is related to your point on like resisting the algorithm still, like and perhaps working with AI as well. Like when you don't even have the source material to kind of like aggregate and connect things, you kind of have to do the work of like uploading things to yourself. Like you mentioned, you upload your own images and finds here, and in turn like put more representation to like Filipino like um extracted like source material. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it still feels like harder to dive. Like when you work with a lot of like found assets or like derivative material, how constricting are like how is like Arena the only place you go to, or are there other places that you kind of like rip and source assets from? I'm kind of mentioning this also because I noticed that like the boiler room posters, I should just pull them up. Um,
Sure, sure.
have like a bunch of like found um have a bunch of like imagery and assets that you mix together. There's the fire, there's the Catholic symbols, there's the eagle and stuff. Um
Oh my God, I'm getting the
so I'm
best
curious like how do you
flashback.
like assemble these? How do you find your assets? Same with your presentation, with the gifts. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's no, like everything you mentioned was so right. It's actually very you actually, like I would have to go on Google myself and then find photos. Like it's not, but then also there's this thing on Pinterest that I can say, like shout out to the algorithm. If you post a photo, everything below it will actually show you things that are so similar to it, and that will actually make things a lot easier to find. And but then sometimes it's not there because sometimes no one ever posted it on Pinterest. But then I didn't use Pinterest for Boiler Room. I think what we did here, um, not sure if Nash is in this call, but it was like because we made the arena board for Boiler Room. And then we wouldn't even think about it. I think we even had this thought, like, let's just freestyle it. Let's just go crazy and let's just get the most random things and then put them together. And then this is what happened. Like I think when I was making the background for this, like I put Jesus, I put the fire, the dragon, and I think in another post there was like Naruto, like in the background, because that was such a big thing in the Philippines too. Um, it's really just things it was just so random. I think that's what was fun for Boiler Room because like Filipino vernacular is it's so random. Like I love how they don't think about it, but then it just comes up and it becomes its own thing. And then you can consider it be like, oh my God, yeah, I know all of these things, you know? Damn, it's so fun to think about that. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a really like Filipino identity is
The
often this
randomness.
assemblage of, yeah, like clashing identities. And like it's just filled with contradictions, I guess. I mean, yeah, Gab left a comment in the chat like Dragon Ball Z and Catholic symbols are in the same image. There's all these like clashing like marks where it's almost like, yes, you can see like Western and like imperialist influences, but then we've kind of like ridiculed it. And
Yeah.
do you feel like your designs are like breaking any rules or breaking any standards of what is like um what design should be? I'm just curious as to that.
Oh, girl, I think for sure. Actually, something that I know about myself, um, as a designer is that I hate rules. I find, God, I hate rules. Like I love it when a client, for example, just trusts me with everything, and then I just have so much fun. But then, like when there are rules, like I just feel so creatively constricted. And actually, that's actually what led me to become very experimental because like I can't take following a tutorial, a video tutorial. It's very limiting though, because like, you know, for example, it's gonna stop me from learning a new skill, but then at the same time, it's how I learn new skills. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna immerse myself blindly, um, go into it and then um experiment, even though this is probably not how you do it, right? But then again, also like what I find so fascinating about design and design programs is that you can navigate it however you want and however you do. Like there are probably like more like better ways to go around it, but like it's so fun when you know how to do it yourself. Like for example, I think like whenever sometimes I compare my Photoshop design process to other friends, they're so different. Like with their layers, they group everything, or like the way they achieve this one goal, they will like use other tools and other settings, and then I would do something else. But then we can achieve something similar. It's just like in different ways. For me, I think I had this comparison in my head. I would compare it to math. Like there's like an equation, actually, no, I don't know if I can compare it to math. I haven't taken math in so long, but like there's like a question, there's an answer. And then people will do different ways on how to achieve it. And I feel like it's also similar to design. So yeah,
I'm going to bring up a question left in the Q&A
sure,
that
sure.
feels related to those questions about rule breaking and what it means to kind of like subvert the usage of like software and use it in unexpected, maybe like more informal ways. Zubin Welshi asks, in the age of the internet and easy access to tools and information, why did you feel it was important to pursue a formal degree in design? You took a what course in
Ooh,
Ateneo?
good question. It was called information design, actually. I highly recommend taking a formal degree still, just because I feel like my style, all these like graphics, the maximalism, the colors, that's me. But like the formal elements, for example, like being able to choose typography that would communicate a certain idea, or being able to learn more about what makes a brand, like the visual language of a brand, the logo, the type, the imagery that comes with it, and even like web design. There's just like so much to learn in design. I feel like it's important to still be guided if you're the type of person who needs that guidance, because I feel like this is also like, you know, to each your own thing. Like um if you feel like in the internet, like you can learn anything you can with all these resources, then that's cool too. But like I feel like personally, um I like being guided by people who know a lot more than me, and people who have had a lot of experience in all these like unique design fields, because design is just so broad. There's so many different things that you can master. My favorite, what I took away was like brand design. I love branding, but then there were some there are some people who love illustration. There are some people um, who love web design, and there's so many different routes that you can go. And I feel like the curriculum that I took kind of showed you the basics of like all, and then they're like, okay, after that, you just choose what you want to pursue later on. So yeah, I think it's still very important, but I think with the internet and like all these different tools that are emerging, I think it's so important to keep trying and keep experimenting and playing with all of them. Because I have this thing um, where I would mix in very like ratchet ratchet design tools like PixArt um or even like Microsoft Paint. Like you can have like there's like a Microsoft Paint emulator somewhere online there. And then merging this with AI and then merging this with like more traditional stuff like Photoshop. It's so fun to just mix it. I feel like it really emits something that's so unique. If you could go to my Instagram, please. Um, so an example I would say about that, like just mixing all these different tools, is if you could go to the sweater down there, that one. Yes. Oh my gosh, I have to post about it. But like the backgrounds, if you can see the backgrounds, those are actually the ones with the bubbles and the sea and the butterflies. Um, Originally they were on PixArt. So PixArt is like a very ratchet um, collage program that like all the e-girls and the e-boys use. And we ended up like feeding the collages that I made to Midjourney, and then it made a very hyper definition um, version of that background. It's so hard to explain because like I don't have the PixArt files on my Instagram, but I'll post it one day. So yeah, it's kind of like I love merging like all these different tools together to make something unique that can't be achieved on Photoshop and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing about using the PixArt materials is that I'm assuming they're like default like PixArt kind of like kitsch kind of like
Yeah,
design
they were.
assets.
Yeah, yeah. I love Pixar.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you just make use of kind of like the defaults of the software that are often just like ignored or are seen as too like generic or too messy. And instead like completely like repurpose them and kind of like give them new life. Like I would have never guessed that this was sorry.
It was Pixar, but then I put it in Midjourney and then they made it like crazy. So it was like different steps. So.
I want to ask about your generation, but there's another question in the chat that relates
Okay.
to another project you did on the Mall Edits EP from Michael.
Okay. Yeah.
Michael says they helped out with promo for the Mall Edits EP by Reese Dogma
Yay.
777. I would love to hear more about your inspiration process for the design and art direction of the cover, the physicals, etc.
Oh my God. Michael, when I tell you, this took like a year and a half, I think, to come out. Just because like there were so many things that were going on in between. But the actually, could you go to the next one, please? I might have like the old draft somewhere there. Oh, that's my bikini shot. That's not that
Sorry, it's so
one.
scary
No
navigating on
worries.
Instagram. Okay, which
Wait,
one?
I feel like okay, maybe this one. No, maybe the one on the left. I don't think I posted it. There's so many graphics in my vault that like are not out. But so this is actually a mood board of my inspiration behind the cover for Mall Edits. But then obviously like I think I played around with it and then I made it its own thing. It's so cute. I wish this was a shirt. um, but yeah, here you can see that this was actually um, a bunch of karaoke CDs from Southeast Asia. Like I combined stuff um, from Taiwan, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, Indonesia. Um, I think here you can see beauties around the world. I just love that. I just love that. I love that. What's that? The title. And I think like from there, I ended up branching out into different things that like were related to like this karaoke vibe. So you know, like when you have a karaoke, you see that stock video of just like waterfalls falling, all this nature, all the mountains. So if you go to the cover, please. It's actually those images, but then distorted. I just made it like glowy. I put some sort of effect, and then I put a CD to sort of like give that vibe. Because I think like when my like when Chris Fussner, like my ex-boss, when we were talking about when we were brainstorming about mall edits, we were actually thinking about those malls that had like all these like bootleg stuff in it, like the bootleg DVDs, all these like karaoke DVDs, all these different stores. So we were trying to like find something within the mall to exude this type of vibe for um the mall edits project. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Bring back bootleg stores and mall, the chat
That's so
says.
true. That's so true.
This reminds me also of we talked a bit about like the academic like design background, and
Yeah.
um you mentioned a bit about like the very bad like Western design book you read, and Bianca has left a few questions in the chat about like what a Filipino design curriculum could look like. So maybe I wanted to like weave in like um have you like engaged with like work from like Clara Balaguer and like Christian Henson and Hardworking Good Looking? We're like Filipinos who have made publications and like research on like Filipino vernacular design. Often they work with, I think, like people who work in print shops, in like piece
Yeah,
of print
yeah.
stores.
Hmm.
So maybe because like I don't know, they do a lot of like bootlegging design. They're like seen as like technical workers as opposed to like creative designers. They're just like
Hmm.
technicians is what most people think, but then their design
They're
practice I think is like
designers. Hmm.
yeah, and it's like seen throughout like mall culture through when you go to Binondo, they're the designers of the spaces.
Definitely, 100%. You're right. Is this is the question from Bianca, right? If you could design a curriculum, learning experience for future Filipino design students?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. That's such a fun question because I've actually thought about it. um I would make it like a I've always like so I have this fantasy of becoming a professor maybe one day just for like a year or two. Like I want to make it like a reality show where I'm gonna make everyone compete and I would make them go through all these different challenges. And I think that's one of the things that I would do. Like I think what I would do is I would divide it into different phases, or in my head it would be like episodes like for a reality show. I would definitely do I'll take a lot of inspiration from Carl Castro, the professor that was mentioned actually before, because what he did was he actually made us do like live visitations with like different artisans in the Philippines. And it was so interesting being immersed, like really immersed there. And I feel like when I would do things in tropical futures, everything was online. This was during COVID, and then at some point I was in Barcelona. But I would have these thoughts like, it would be so cool if I would actually go here, if I would actually attend these sound system battles in Cebu, or if I did like some field work in in Manila somehow. Um, so yeah, like imagine actually going there. Um, so I think that's what I would do. I would do immersion, and of course, like I would love to have talks from people who are masters of their craft. Like I would love to have Christian Henson talk about Philippine typography and have them buy the book, right? Um, and I feel like another fun part would just be like exposing them to different Filipino pop culture, like making them watch some like let's watch some game shows, let's watch some movies, some TV shows, some commercials, and see like all these inspirations that can come up from it. So yeah. It's
I feel like you
gonna be a fun
imagining
class.
Imagining
Yeah.
like a reality show kind of like setup as a design curriculum actually feels so fitting because I feel like there's always that kind of like loud performative but not inauthentic like nature in Filipino design. Like the way design
Mm-hmm.
is mostly manifested culturally is like through ads, through like the through tarpaulins, through
Mm-hmm.
like the wrapping we put on store walls, on decals, on jeepneys, etc. It's always like
Yeah.
community driven and seen and
Mm-hmm.
loud as a result.
Right. And I would love that. But also like I would love to have them have freedom over the styles, or like when they make something for the class, for example, like if there's a project, like take inspiration from it and then do your thing. Because like just I feel like navigating your own style is so important, because like for years when I was younger, I would have this vision in my head and I wouldn't know how to execute it. It's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world, like if I want to make this thing, but like I don't have, like, i don't know I don't know how to get to it. So I feel like being able to explore on your own is so important, because you'll know more about your process, you'll know more about how to like achieve the certain look. And yeah.
I wanted to backtrack and bring up an earlier point in regards to like image
Mhm.
generation and some of your experiments, I guess, with AI.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious in your usage of it because, as we mentioned, like there's maybe not a lot of like good Filipino source material. Sometimes it's kind of hard to assemble these
Mhm.
from like found sources
Mm.
online, and we're not very well represented in the data sets used in generation. But then
Mhm.
you find a way to like make these images and then repurpose them, and bend them. And I'm gonna pull up your Lavish Lab
Oh my gosh, lavish lab.
account
Okay.
of AI experiments.
Mhm.
So I was curious in like your
There's a lot.
usage of
Mhm.
AI in your process and how you like bend these systems or like kind of repurpose them in
Mhm.
your design practice.
Oh my God, I love AI. I swear. I mean, there's a lot of AI haters, but she's my bestie. So actually, like I started using all these generative image AI tools because for years when I was a designer without AI, I would always think, God, like this would be so much easier if I had this photo right now. And then I would go through Google Images like for like an hour, not finding what I wanted. And just like the control I had over it was so fun. Like now I just have to go on Mid-Journey. I pay for it, by the way, because I love it that much. But like, so that's how it started. But then like it evolved into like all these imaginations that would just come from my head, because I'm just a very visual person. That's who I am. I also write my dreams. And then sometimes I would want to make my dreams into movies, and I would want to have like the visuals come out of it. So sometimes I would do that on Midjourney. It's just so much fun. I think like um, partly I use it for my design process when I need photos, when I need certain things, but also partly it's honestly my hobby. Like it's so imaginative. I think like, oh, is the Harry Potter one there? There was one time where I was like, what if Harry Potter was set in the Philippines? I don't know if it's there. The one with the Filipino Hogwarts. I want to show you guys that,
Oh my God,
because
which
I
one
think
is
that
Filipino
that's the one that
Hogwarts?
relates to your question. Okay, we could go down just a bit. Okay, we'll get there.
Oh,
There,
here.
that one over there. So I worked so hard on this. I was like playing with all the prompts. Um, so here, because I'm a huge Potterhead, I love Harry Potter so much. Um, I wanted to reimagine, like, because in the Harry Potter lore, there's apparently like a wizarding school in every place in the world, but there was none in the Philippines, and I was like, we have to know how that looks like. So I was really like trying my best to make it as Filipino, but also very like fantasy as possible. Like for example, this one, like I was thinking, there's this like show, I think it's called, oh my God, I forgot the name. I think it was called Encantada. So I don't know if I'm right, but like they were like these fantasy like strong female wizards or superheroes, and I think it was rooted in like um in Filipino mythology, and then they all had these gems, and I wanted to like put that here. I don't even know what this is, but it's just like it's a magical thing. But even with like the architecture of some of the places, um I like how that one, like I like how it incorporates the trees, nature, um and like the thing is like I don't even know if this is a Filipino thing, but like I know it incorporates the area and the nature. This is how I would imagine architecture to evolve if like we weren't colonized or something. Maybe. I think that's another thing. Like we can also reimagine so many things. Because I feel like in the West they have like maxed out imagination, like yeah, to the max. Like they really like expanded all these world building stuff. But like I feel like east and like in especially in the tropics this hasn't been done enough, and I feel like there are so many narratives and so many stories that we can tell, and AI is one of the ways that we can do it, definitely.
Yeah, like so many kind of possible futures and so many like directions for growth have also been kind of like robbed and taken away from us because of like
Hmm.
imperialism and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's funny kind of reappropriating the usage of AI to
Yeah.
kind of imagine ourselves in different settings and what ifs and etc. as a way of like
Hmm.
repositioning ourselves and giving ourselves like more say, I guess, in
Hmm.
envisioning what Filipino living and design could be.
For sure. Actually, a big inspiration of mine with all these generative works is if you could search Pratik Arora. So he is an Indian sci-fi writer who does a lot of like these generative works, reimagining India in a very sci-fi context. So yes, this is the one. This is the one. He's amazing, and like I remember feeling so inspired, wanting to like reimagine the Philippines in all these ways. But he's so good. He's crazy, amazing. You guys should follow him. And this is like some of the ways that we can do it, right?
It's interesting also because your a lot of the aesthetics and imagery you use, especially like the boiler room stuff and um some of the other graphics you've done. I'm gonna go back to your Instagram.
Okay.
Um, kind of like use like Y2K aesthetics, and
Uh-huh.
it seems like the generations that you do and a lot of like Pratik's work also like imagine like in a very like domestic, mundane, and maybe like
Mm-hmm.
old or settings, what could be
Mm-hmm.
like with like subtle like futurist elements
Right,
or something
right.
like that. And there's this blending of using a very futuristic like AI tool, which also has a
Mm-hmm.
limited like data set that only captures and really represents like information from a certain source of time,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
against like the like extreme other end of your usage of assets, which is like it seems like using a lot of like Y2K style like geo cities as
Mm-hmm.
gifts. There's like this blending of past and future.
Oh my God, so that's what you meant by like the blending. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna expand on that.
I feel like the reason why I do this is because well, I was raised by the internet. Like I talked about that earlier. Like the internet is just um I feel like I was on the computer more than I was outside, let's to be honest. And there are just so many amazing things that were like I overlooked before, and I was like, oh my God, using this here would be so cool. I feel like this incorporates a lot of like how I love to use pop culture because it's something that's still very reminiscent, something that people will identify and be like, damn, I miss this stuff. Um like even if you go to I think I did a Justin Bieber DJ set. I didn't really DJ, by the way. Like the person who I B2B'd with did the mix. I can't DJ. But um yeah, it's a bit lower. Damn, I post a lot. That's that one. This is so like, oh my God. Like all the fangirls, they know this. They know this aesthetic. They know this. design movement. And it's something that I feel like is overlooked, but like when you do it, it hits, and those who get it, they get it. It's such a time in history, it has to be revived. So yeah.
It's so interesting. Like it's so good. It's so nostalgic. It has the word art, it has the blingy
Yeah.
style graphics, it has the old YouTube slider. I love that detail.
Shout out to all the believers. It's a part of history, and I feel like it's part of who I am, and it's a part of a lot of other people's history too. And yeah.
What do you think of like I guess like the recent Y2K like resurgence and like graphic
Hmm.
trend? Like there's music videos now that kind of like
Yes.
evoke like movie maker style things in a kind of like ironic way. And there's also just like a bunch of like
Yes.
teens making edits on TikTok, using like software styles and kind of like graphic forms that honestly they didn't experience.
I
It
love
just
it.
like reminds me of how like the lag and the like the low res thing isn't necessarily what we
Uh-huh.
have in software today, but people try to like emulate those graphic qualities to try and like position a design as like
Hmm.
I don't know, like emotionally aligned with like an earlier time.
Hmm.
I don't know how you feel about like using like these old gift styles or like seeing kids use them when they've never like necessarily like lived through the software. Like what does it mean to like bring it back
Oh, I
in a
love
way?
it. I love it so much. I feel like um it's like an ode to those times, and like, appropriate it, girl. I don't care if you've never experienced it, do it. Like it's a time in history that has to be remembered. Um I feel like, oh my God, do you know Romance Planet? Romance Planet. Okay, on YouTube, can you please search Romance Planet? Because it's so interesting to me how um, this artist, Romance Planet, he loves to do like Fall from the Sky, that one. You can play it on mute, but let's just show the visuals. He is reviving this this ugly aesthetic. And like I found it so ugly. I remember even when I was a kid, but like just seeing it again and seeing how someone can sort of like repurpose it as art and not what it originally was, just like a probably like a stock photo that someone would slap on a notebook. It's so, I don't know, it's so interesting to me. I love it. Um, I think I haven't thought about it enough, but like um I don't know if it's like I feel like these kids who are doing it, I'm not sure. This is just my theory. I feel like they do it because they are so sick of like what social media is like now. A lot of the things in social media are so toxic. I mean, let's just be real. Everyone says that, but it is. And I feel like they sort of glorify what it was before. This is just my guess. Um, Seeing like trying to reimagine what it would be like in those times, kind of like, I mean, how my generation, they were like, oh, I want to be like, I'm from the early 2000s, even if like in reality I was probably like 2 years old in the early 2000s. I can't wear like a crop top like Britney Spears. So so yeah, I feel like it's kind of just, and yeah, this is I think this is called organic 𝓢𝓪𝓼𝓱𝓪 arrow. That's what I heard somebody coin it, this aesthetic. So
Something that also makes this aesthetic in use today interesting is that it kind of feels harder to make designs that look like this now
I know,
compared to before,
that's so real.
despite the evolution in tools, because just like
Hmm.
like the bases and the defaults of a lot of these softwares have like changed. It
Right.
They favor like minimalist or like smooth looking designs that
Oh
emulating
yeah.
the lossy kind of style and doing the like the crazy overlays
Hmm.
actually
For
feels
sure.
it's a technical achievement to make something look like this.
For sure, for sure. And I love how people do this even with music, not just design. I mean, you don't have to play it because I think it's gonna be like hella loud, but this song is it's like a combination of emo, hyperpop, and Europop. And I just find it so I just find it so interesting. I love how people like always merge all these different sounds, all these different aesthetics to make something new. It's so fun.
I wanted to bring up discussion has been in the Q&A that is
Okay.
perhaps us moving from thinking about the usage of past aesthetics to imagining the present or the
Mm-hmm.
future rather. From 𝓢𝓪𝓼𝓱𝓪 Filipino designer here as well. Filipino identity being an amalgamation of random things and still having such a spirit is so real. I'd love to know what you see in the future for Filipino design in its vernacular, considering what that's like outside of the Philippines as well. Hopes,
Mm.
observations, what you love seeing now, etc. For some context, I'm currently working on a project exploring Filipino identity negotiation and participation, both in the diaspora and the Philippines. So I'm excited to hear your design perspective on this.
Hmm. That's a very good question. Looking at the future of Filipino design. Um, the thing is, um, the way you described my works earlier and like being able to sort of like blend all these different influences together. I feel like I want to see more designers who would play on that because there are a couple, there's like there's Snash Cruise, there's you, there's the stuff in Tropical Futures. There's like all these different designers, but I feel like in the mainstream and like even in design education, I feel like it has to be um incorporated in some way. I feel like it isn't there enough. I feel like the book you mentioned earlier, the one by Christian Henson, and like um, all these personal finds that you would see on the internet, they're not really in, um, they don't really teach it in school yet. And it's not something that you can come across very easily. And I don't really know, or I'm not sure what I would see for the future for Filipino design, but um, I think was very, I think it has to start though with um, I feel like for me, I would like it to start with having a bit more respect for Philippine design. I think that should be the first step because I feel like um, designers respect designers, but I feel like there is still a lot of stigma around this career path and around this craft. Um, like I have a lot of friends who are designers in the Philippines who have really bad clients, the ones who always like haggle down the prices and so on, and like they just don't understand. They don't understand expression in design works. They want pure like make it look like this and this and this, and it sucks because I feel like being a designer and an artist, it blends together in some way, and being able to have this expression as a Filipino designer is very important. And I feel like there has to be more conversations um, around fostering this design community and the craft, making it more mainstream, I guess, and not just something that like all the artsy hipsters do, you know?
Do you think part of it is because most design expression happens with like you go study like information design or you go study in CSB or something and then you work at an ad agency?
Oh
Um,
my God. Could be. There's just I feel like it's just so limited. Like in terms of career path, like I think the very traditional and the first thing that people would think of is like, yeah, working in an agency or working in-house. And not all, but I feel like most of these are very like they'll tell you what to do and then you just execute and it lacks creativity. It's corporate in the end, right? And yeah, that makes me sad.
what do you think would elevate design to art, or what do you think is needed for designers to feel more perhaps in tune with like creative expression or to have more leverage in finding like concepts and weaving them as part of their outputs?
Ah, that's so difficult just because I feel like it's dependent on so many things. Like I really feel like there has to be more awareness with like having respect for all these designers because I feel like we won't ever be able to leverage that if like the person who we're working for doesn't want to cooperate. Because for example, like if I want to make something and I want to make it this or that, like if the client doesn't want it, then that'll be very difficult to do. Because like I think what's difficult for designers is that like it's not just pure you can just do your own thing, right? As much as we would want it to be. Like it always has to accompany something else. It usually almost always has a purpose, whether it's to promote something, whether it's to navigate, whether it's just there's just so many like there's just so many different factors that go into it. Um and I don't know, it's so hard. I honestly don't know how to make it that mainstream. It's difficult. It's very difficult.
Do you have any other closing thoughts or messages?
Hmm. I I think no, I don't have any closing thoughts, but I guess like what I would say is that like I would like to thank everybody who came here and who had all these amazing questions. Like I love how everybody is also thinking about all these thoughts that we talked about. And I feel like as like for all the Filipino designers who are in this call, like I want you to go crazy, girl, go crazy. Just do your thing with your design. I feel like expression is so important, and being like just expressing who you are is what will make your works unique. It's so cheesy, but so simple and so true.
Thank you so, so much for this lovely presentation and for such lovely takes and then responses to all of these questions, Sasha.
Mhm.
Truly graphic design, pop star, princess, fan art,
Thank you.
queen, representing the Philippines past and future. It's amazing. Thank you so much for this. This is so
Thank
great.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Chia. I love you all. Aw.
Thank you everyone for joining. This is the first of Develop's talk in our dry season talk series. It's like 44
Mhm.
degrees in the Philippines. God bless. We're next gonna have a conversation um on like trinkets and mementos with Bao on May 3rd. The link for that is there, and Sasha's Instagram link is also in the chat and will be left in the description along with other references. But do check out her work, her passport portfolio, her arena, which is amazing. Her work past and present. Please
Mhm.
follow.
Feel free
Um,
to DM me, by the way, about anything that you guys want to keep talking about because I feel like there's so many more conversations that we can have around all these topics. So yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Take care. Have a good day, night, afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you guys. Bye bye. Very great.